The Ferrari SF90. Stradol sat dead under the chandeliers of the Meridian Grand Showcase, $500,000 of red metal that refused to make a sound. 30 of America's top engineers knelt around it, flown in from Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami sleeves, rolled past the elbow ties, loosened hands black with 5 hours of failure. 300 guests in evening dress stood behind the velvet rope, holding champagne flutes that had gone warm. CEO Catherine Hale watched from 10 feet away, spine, straight mouth, a thin line. A $60 million contract waited on the next breath in the room. Then the service door opened. A man in a faded mechanic's jacket stepped through, holding the small hand of a 6-year-old girl who clutched a red toy Ferrari against her chest. He looked at the car once, then he stopped walking. The Meridian Grand Showcase opened every fall in the same ballroom on the west side of Manhattan, and every fall, Catherine Hale walked the same hallway to reach it. She had walked it as a girl beside her father, her hand in his, the marble floor, catching the heels of her school shoes. She had walked it again at 26, the day they buried him in a black coat that did not fit yet. She had walked it as CEO 7 years ago when the company was bleeding out, and she had 30 days to prove she could close the wound. She walked it tonight in a charcoal gown alone, and she stopped the way she always stopped in front of the framed photograph hanging between the elevator banks and the rear doors of the ballroom. Her father at 53, a wrench in one hand, grease on the other, standing next to a prototype that no longer existed. The brass plate beneath the photograph read only his name and the year 1998. She did not know she still did this. She thought she had outgrown it. She kept walking before anyone could see her, stopped there. 300 guests had already filled the ballroom by the time she stepped through the side entrance, champagne flutes catching the light. The Italian delegation gathered near the south wall in a careful half circle around Marco Ferretti, who at 65 years old still wore the same black suit he had worn the first time he had shaken hands with her father in the spring of 1996. He nodded to her across the room. She nodded back. $60 million sat in the space between that nod and the contract on the table behind him. Bradley Cross moved through the crowd toward her with 2 flutes of champagne and the smile he had worn for 20 years in rooms exactly like this one. He was 47 in a tailored navy suit, and Catherine had trusted him for 4 years because 4 years ago, when the company was still steadying itself on its legs, he had been the only senior engineer who never raised his voice in a board meeting. Steady was what she had needed then. Steady was what she had paid for. He handed her a glass. Marco's already mentioned the audit clause twice. He wants it in the appendix. Let him have it. It's a precedent. It's a clause. She did not drink. Where are we on the SF90 score? Oh, small muscle moved at the corner of Bradley's mouth. We're working it. That isn't an answer. 5 hours in. The ECU keeps throwing a logic fault and rolling back. We've reseated the controller, we've swapped the diagnostic harness, we've rerun the firmware. The car will not turn over. Marco knows. Marco has not asked. Marco does not need to ask. She turned the glass in her hand once and set it back on a passing tray. The Ferrari SF90 Stradol was the centerpiece of the evening. $500,000 of polished red Italian engineering on loan from Marconi as a gesture of partnership parked under the chandeliers on a low platform behind a velvet rope. It was supposed to come alive at 9 o'clock to a room full of cameras. It was 8:41, and it had been dead since 3 in the afternoon. In the far corner of the showcase floor, a young woman in a slate-gray pantsuit sat with her tablet balanced on her knees. Natalie Osai was 27 years old and had been with Hale Performance Group for 8 months. She had taken the job because of a single internal white paper she had read in graduate school, a paper on hybrid thermal feedback in low-temperature cycling that had reorganized how she thought about powertrain logic. The paper was signed Bradley Cross. She had come to Hale specifically to work under the man who wrote it. 8 months later, she had stopped believing he wrote it. He could not talk about the paper the way the paper talked about itself. The vocabulary in his meetings was a half step off. The instincts were not there. She had been quiet about this. She had a job and a student loan and a sublet she could not afford to lose. But on her tablet in a folder, she had not shared with anyone she had been keeping a list. A list of every diagnostic the team had run on the SF-90 tonight. And at the bottom of the list, in lowercase letters, she had typed about 2 hours ago and not spoken aloud a single line. Thermal feedback loop hybrid controller. She had written it. She had not raised her hand. 3 blocks east of the building, inside a service corridor that smelled of polished cement and old coffee, Ryan Calloway was walking toward the finance office with his daughter's hand in his. He was 31. He wore a gray work jacket with a small grease stain on the left cuff that had been there for 2 years and would not come out. He had come to the building tonight for one reason. The contract administrator at Hale needed a wet signature on a freight form, the last paperwork on a delivery he had completed, at 4 in the afternoon. The trucking dispatch had told him it would take 10 minutes. He would be home by 9. The babysitter had canceled at 5:30. His daughter Lily was 6 years old and walked beside him in a navy puffer jacket, 2 sizes too large, because she had picked it herself at the second-hand store and refused anything else. In her right hand, she held a die-cast Ferrari scaled 1 to 18, painted the precise red of the car, parked 140 feet away from her, in a room she had not yet seen. Her mother had given it to her one ordinary Tuesday afternoon in a hospital gift shop 2 weeks before the end. Her mother had been gone for almost a year now. Lily had brought the car everywhere for the first 6 months, then most places. Now only the places that mattered, and Ryan had not asked her how she decided which were which. They reached the end of the service corridor. The door to the finance office was on the right. The door to the showcase floor was on the left, propped open with a rubber wedge by a caterer who had gone for ice. Ryan turned right. He took 2 steps and slowed. The hum from the open doorway was wrong. He knew that hum. Not the sound of the room, the sound of what was missing from it. 300 people in evening dress and not one engine note. At 8:43 on a launch night. He stopped. He looked left. He could see the rear quarter panel of the SF-90 from where he stood. He could see 2 engineers crouched at the front fender with a diagnostic tablet between them. He could see the angle of the tablet, the way one of them was scrolling and the other was waiting. He could see on the floor beside the front tire the way the bolts had been laid out, not in a row, but in a small, chaotic cluster, the way bolts get laid out by someone who has been working on the same problem for too long and stopped caring about where the bolts went. 10 seconds. He saw the whole picture. He did not see the car. He saw the shape of the failure around it. He saw which subsystem they were chasing and which one they had already dismissed. He saw the small wireless temperature probe taped to the battery housing, which meant they had gone looking for thermal anomaly and had not found one, because the anomaly only appeared at a temperature differential they were not testing for. He had written about this temperature differential 6 years ago at a desk on the 11th floor of the building he was now standing inside. Lily tugged his hand. "Dad." He did not answer. She looked up. She did not understand the expression on her father's face, but she recognized it because she had not seen it in almost 4 years. And small children remember the faces of their parents the way other people remember songs. It was the face he had worn at the kitchen table, with a notebook open in front of him before her mother got sick. The face that meant her father was somewhere very far away and very close at the same time, somewhere inside a problem that belonged to him. She did not pull his hand again. She stood very still. Across the showcase floor, Natalie Osei looked up from her tablet because she felt something in the air shift and saw a man in a faded jacket standing in a service doorway with a child beside him. The man was not looking at the car. He was looking at the work around the car. She knew that look. She had not seen it on anyone in this building in 8 months. 3 feet to Natalie's left, Bradley Cross looked up too. His face changed. It did not change the way a face changes when an unauthorized person enters a private event. It changed the way a face changes when someone you have spent 4 years not thinking about walks through a door you forgot to lock. The color went out of his cheeks in 2 distinct stages. His right hand closed around the stem of his champagne flute hard enough that Catherine, watching him from 12 feet away, saw his knuckles go white. She had been about to ask him a question about Marco. She did not ask it. She watched her vice president of engineering stare at a stranger in a service doorway, and she understood, in the cold and unhurried way she understood most things, that she was looking at a man who had something to lose. And under that, something colder, Bradley had recognized the man. Whoever had just walked through that door, Bradley had known him before tonight. Bradley moved first. He set the flute down on the nearest tray without looking at the tray, and walked toward the doorway with the controlled stride of someone trying not to run. "This is a closed event," he said loud enough for the nearest engineers to lift their heads. "Sir, you need to step back." Security. A man in a black blazer materialized from the south wall and started across the floor. Lily released her father's hand. She did not say anything. She walked 1 step forward and stood beside him, the toy Ferrari pressed against her ribs with both hands, and she looked up at the security officer's face without blinking. The officer slowed. A child looking at an adult without fear has a particular gravity. The room felt it before anyone named it. Conversations near the velvet rope dropped half a register. 2 engineers stood up from the SF-90. Catherine crossed the floor. She did not hurry. She stopped 4 feet from Ryan and Lily and did not look at Ryan. She looked at the car. "What do you see?" she asked. Ryan did not answer immediately. He was aware of the weight of his daughter's hand, finding his again. He was aware of Bradley Cross, standing 6 feet to his right, breathing in a way that men do not breathe in rooms they control. He was aware that he had walked into this building tonight to sign a freight form and had 4 minutes ago been counting the steps to the finance office. He could leave. He had learned 4 years ago and again every year since what it cost, to be honest, in rooms that did not invite him. But he was looking at a car he had helped design, sitting silent in a room full of people who had given up on it. And underneath that, deeper than the math, deeper than the grief, deeper than the worn jacket and the unpaid invoice in his pocket, he remembered something he had not let himself remember in a long time. He used to love this. Before Sarah, before the hospital, before Lily learning to read in waiting rooms, he used to love the sound of an engine that had been quiet, finally turning over. He looked at Catherine Hale. "I see what's wrong with it," he said. Bradley moved before Ryan finished the sentence. "He doesn't have the credentials." Bradley addressed Catherine, not the man in the doorway, the way a lawyer speaks past a witness. "He's a contract mechanic on the freight side. We cannot let an outside party touch a $500,000 customer asset on a closed event floor. The liability alone." Catherine did not turn her head. "What's wrong with it, Mr. Calloway?" Ryan considered Bradley for a moment longer than necessary. Then he turned his face to the car. "You have a thermal feedback loop between the battery controller and the main ECU. It goes out of phase when ambient drops below 58 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're past the 3rd cold start cycle. The ECU reads it as a logic fault, not a hardware one. So it rolls into safe mode and refuses ignition. You won't find it in the official documentation. The fault analysis was never formally filed. Several engineers near the front fender straightened. The young one, who had been kneeling for 5 hours, leaned forward, as if Ryan had said something in a language he had been trying to remember. Bradley laughed, one short, hard sound. "That theory has been tested and ruled out." In the corner of the showcase floor, Natalie Osei looked at her tablet. The cursor blinked at the bottom of her diagnostic list on the line she had typed 2 hours ago and not spoken aloud. She looked up. "It hasn't," she said. The room turned toward her. She felt the turn the way a swimmer feels current. "It hasn't been tested," she said, again quieter to Catherine. "It's not on the diagnostic log. I can show you." Bradley's head moved a fraction in her direction. 8 months of small adjustments she had made in his presence. 8 months of staying useful and staying quiet. She could feel all of them ending in this single second. Her hand on the tablet was not steady. Her voice was. Catherine looked at Bradley, then at Natalie, then at the car. "What do you need?" she asked Ryan. "A T40 torques a torque wrench in 5 minutes, he said. The senior tech at the front fender unzipped a black foam tool case and lifted out the tools. He held them out to Ryan with both hands, the way a man hands over something he has not been allowed to use correctly. Ryan took them. He looked down at Lily. "Sit," he said quietly. Lily walked to the upholstered banquette along the velvet rope and climbed up. The toy Ferrari went on her lap, both her small hands wrapped around it. She had done this before. She knew the rule. When Dad worked, she sat. She did not interrupt. She held the car. Ryan stepped over the velvet rope. He did one small thing first that no one in the room understood. He took off his wristwatch, a cheap steel band 15 years old, and laid it on the floor mat behind the front tire, because the case had a small burr he had been meaning to file down for 2 years, and he did not want it to scratch the paint. Then he opened the hood. He did not look inside. His hands went to the correct place on the first attempt. 4 seconds. The young engineer who had been kneeling there for 5 hours watched and did not breathe. Ryan removed 3 bolts. He did it in a way the room registered without quite knowing why it was registering. Each bolt came up clean. Each bolt was set down on the floor mat at the same distance from the front of the car, about 8 centimeters, in a small, neat line. Not because anyone needed them in that arrangement, because that was the arrangement his hands had made for 10 years, and his hands were not interested in changing. The young engineer in the corner looked at his own bolts, scattered on a paper towel like a kicked deck of cards, and felt something he could not name. Ryan stopped. He looked at one component for what one of the senior engineers watching from 6 feet away would later count as 7 full seconds. He did not speak. He did not move his hands. He looked. Catherine, 3 meters from his shoulder, became aware that her own breathing had slipped into the cadence of his stillness, and let it. Ryan moved. It was a single motion. A small, precise turn of the wrench, 2 clicks, no more. He held the position for half a second to feel the resistance, then released. He reassembled in reverse order. 3 bolts, 2 bolts, 1 bolt. Each one going back into the same hole it had come out of. The torque wrench clicked at the same setting 3 times in a row even, and final, like the closing of a clean ledger. He closed the hood. He stepped back. He wiped his hands on the front of his jacket, not because they were dirty, but out of a habit so old it had stopped meaning anything. He nodded to Catherine. The room had not made a sound in 5 minutes. Not one cough. Not one shuffled foot. 300 guests in evening dress had become a single-held breath. Catherine walked to the driver's door. She opened it, set her clutch on the passenger seat, and lowered herself into the leather. The driver's seat had been positioned for a man 6 inches taller than her. She left it where it was. She pressed the start button. The V8 came alive. Not a stutter. Not a hesitation. A full, even settled note from a hybrid engine that had been silent for 5 hours and 21 minutes. The exhaust burble caught against the marble walls of the ballroom and came back doubled layered alive. 3 full seconds of perfect silence followed. The kind of silence that arrives only after the thing that was supposed to happen actually happens. Then Lily on the banquette lifted her toy Ferrari toward the ceiling with both hands. "Vroom," she said. The room broke. It was not laughter the way laughter usually sounds. It was the sound a room makes when it has been holding pressure for 5 hours, and a 6-year-old releases it in a single syllable. Several of the engineers actually sat down on the floor where they had been kneeling. One of them put a hand over his mouth. Marco Ferretti against the south wall smiled for the first time that evening. Catherine stepped out of the car and did not close the door. She was still looking at Ryan when from the corner of the room, Natalie's voice came through the receding noise, not loud, but clear. The way a single bell carries through a station. Hybrid system fault analysis, SF90, low temperature operating envelope. Natalie was reading from her tablet. Submitted to the Hale Performance R&D Group, March of 2020. Author of record, Ryan Calloway. The noise stopped. It did not fade. It stopped the way a record stops when a hand lifts off the needle. Catherine looked at Natalie, then at Ryan, then at Bradley. Marco Ferretti was already looking at Bradley. He had been looking at him since Natalie said the year. The expression on his face was not surprise. It was the expression of a man whose suspicion had finally been given a name. The technical paper Marconi had received from Hale Performance in August of 2020, the paper that had reshaped the SF90's hybrid specification, the paper that bore the signature of Bradley Cross, had been received 5 months after a draft of the same framework. The same calculations, the same conclusions had been left on a server inside this very building under a different name. Marco did not say anything. He held Bradley's gaze and let Bradley feel it. Bradley spoke. His voice had the wrong volume. That's a coincidence. 2 engineers can arrive at the same conclusion. My paper went through peer review and full sign-off. His was never even submitted formally. It was a draft on a shared drive. There is no priority claim in a document that was never filed. He turned to Catherine, and his voice climbed half a step the way it did in board meetings when he was about to bring up liability. Catherine, this is a setup. I don't know how this man arranged it, but if you let this play out in front of Marco the contract tonight. Marco spoke for the first time that evening. Mr. Cross. He did not raise his voice. He spoke the way old men speak when they have outlived their own anger and only have language left. I have worked in this industry for 40 years. I know what a man looks like when he has just repaired a car that 30 engineers could not. And I know what a man looks like when he is lying about it. His English carried the soft consonants of his first language. Please do not make me lose any more respect for you tonight. Bradley's mouth was open. He closed it. Catherine looked at her vice president of engineering, and for the first time in 4 years, she looked at him as if she did not know who he was. She walked out. She did not announce it. She did not signal Marco. She walked through the side door behind the velvet rope into the back service hallway, and the door closed behind her with the soft hydraulic sigh of a door designed not to embarrass anyone. The hallway was empty. The acoustic panel swallowed the noise of the ballroom. There was a women's restroom on the right. She stopped in front of it. Her hand went to the handle. She did not push it. She stood there with her palm flat against the brushed steel and felt her hand shake. 4 years. 4 years she had used that paper to rebuild her father's company. The paper had been the proof, the technical credibility, the thing she had carried into the boardroom and laid on the table when the senior partners had still been calling her Frank's girl. That paper had been her credential. She had not written it. She had not been expected to write it, but she had defended it. She had cited it in earnings calls. She had used it to hire. She had used it to win Marco. The paper was not Bradley's, which meant her 4 years, the rebuilding, the trust she had earned with Marconi, the contract sitting on a table 80 feet from where she stood, had been built on something she did not own. She had not stolen it. She had not known. But she had benefited from it. And I did not know had never been a sentence her father accepted from anyone, including her. She thought of him. The work has to be honest, he had told her once at the kitchen table when she was 19 years old and had complained about a professor. Everything else is just paperwork. She had spent 4 years doing the paperwork. She lifted her hand off the door handle. She straightened her dress. She wiped beneath each eye with the edge of her thumb once on each side, with the efficiency of a woman who had not allowed herself to cry at her father's funeral and was not going to start tonight. She turned around and walked back. She walked back as a different woman. The one who had walked out had been protecting her father's legacy. The one walking back understood that her father's legacy was not a company, it was a sentence. While she was gone, Bradley moved. He crossed the floor to where Ryan was standing alone near the velvet rope and laid one hand on his shoulder, lightly, the way a man touches another man at a funeral. His face had reorganized itself into something Catherine, had she been in the room, would have recognized the warm, low, slightly conspiratorial Bradley Cross that 30 years of clients had liked. This was the dangerous version, the version that had built him. Ryan, his voice was low. Listen to me. I know what you've been through. Sarah, I'm sorry about Sarah. I never had the chance to say that. Ryan did not move. You've got a child to raise. I have a private offer. Not through the company, not through any contract. I wire $200,000 into your account by tomorrow morning. You and Lily go somewhere clean. New city. Fresh start. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm only asking you to leave. Tonight gets called a misunderstanding. We all keep moving. Ryan looked at him for a long moment. Across the room, Lily was standing next to Marco Ferretti, holding her toy Ferrari up toward him. The old Italian was crouched on one knee in his black suit, asking her something in his soft accent, and Lily was laughing the high, unself-conscious laugh of a 6-year-old who did not yet know that the room she was in had any politics. Ryan looked back at Bradley. You remembered my wife's name, he said. Bradley did not respond. You knew who I was the moment I walked through the door. Bradley's hand left Ryan's shoulder. You could have offered me $200,000 4 years ago. Ryan's voice was level. You didn't, because 4 years ago I wasn't dangerous to you. I was a guy who had buried his wife and was driving freight to keep a kid in school. I wasn't worth $200,000 to you then. I'm worth it now, because now I'm a problem. He stepped back. I don't want your money. I want my name on my paper. He turned away. He walked to the banquette where Lily had returned. He held out his hand. She put hers in it without asking why. We're going home, he said. She looked up at him with the calm of a child who had learned in the months since her mother died to read the difference between her father's tired and her father's done. This was done. Did you fix the car? She asked. Yes. Then we can go. He took 2 steps toward the service door he had come through. He stopped. He looked back at the Ferrari sitting under the chandeliers with its hood closed and its engine warm and its red paint catching the light. He had sketched the cooling architecture for that car at a kitchen table in a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, while Sarah slept on the couch beside him because the bedroom had been too quiet after the diagnosis. He had never seen the finished car in a room before tonight. It felt like a door closing. He turned back to leave. The side entrance opened. Catherine Hale walked through it. She stopped 2 paces inside the ballroom. She looked across the floor and saw Ryan at the service door with his daughter's hand in his and his back half turned to her. Her voice carried not loud, but pitched to be heard by every person in the room. Mr. Calloway, don't go. 300 faces turned toward the service door at the same time. Ryan stopped with his hand on the doorframe. He did not turn around immediately. Lily looked up at him, then back at the woman in the charcoal gown crossing the floor toward them, and she did the only thing 6-year-olds know how to do in moments they do not yet have words for. She moved a half-step closer to her father and held the toy Ferrari a little tighter against her ribs. Catherine stopped 6 feet from Ryan. She did not look at Bradley. She did not look at Marco. She looked at the man in the faded jacket and at the small girl pressed into the side of his leg. I owe you a sentence, she said. I would like to say it before you walk out that door. Ryan turned around. The room went still in a different way than it had gone still during the repair. That earlier silence had been the silence of waiting. This one was the silence of a thing about to be named. Catherine drew a breath. She did not lower her voice. She had spent 4 years learning that the only sentences worth saying out loud were the ones she could say at full volume. "I cannot give you back 4 years," she said. "But I can stop taking from you. Tell me what you want." Ryan held Catherine's gaze for a long moment before he answered. The room had not moved. 300 guests, the engineers, the press at the back wall, none of them were pretending to look elsewhere anymore. "My name on my paper," he said. "In the official record, before any meeting, before any contract. Nothing more, nothing less." Catherine nodded once. The nod was small and complete, the way a contract gets signed when the signature has already been decided in the head before the pen touches the page. Marco Ferretti stepped forward from the south wall. "If Ms. Hale will permit one addition." His voice did not climb. He was speaking to Catherine, but the room heard him. "The Marconi Consortium has been proposing for some time that authorship audit clauses become a standard appendix in joint technical contracts. We have not previously found a partner willing to sign one. I would like to propose that the contract on the table tonight include such a clause, not as a condition, as a beginning." He looked at Ryan when he said it, not at Catherine. "Tonight is the right night," he said. Ryan's request had been personal. 6 seconds later, it was structural. The thing he had wanted only for himself was now going to be written into a $60 million contract as a precedent that would outlast everyone in the room. Across the floor, Natalie was already moving. She crossed to Marco with her tablet held in front of her, like something fragile, and she handed it to him without speaking. Marco took it, put on a pair of reading glasses he had not worn all night, and scrolled. The tablet held the chain. Server timestamps from March of 2020. File metadata. Version histories. The original draft on the shared drive under Ryan's login. The 5-month gap. The submission under Bradley's name in August. The internal routing logs. Every link in the chain in chronological order, with the access records cross-referenced. Natalie had been building this folder quietly for most of the 8 months she had worked at Hale Performance. She had not built it to use tonight. She had built it because she had needed to know whether she could keep working in the building. She had her answer. Marco read for nearly a minute. He did not speak. He did not have to. When he handed the tablet back, he gave it not to Natalie but to Catherine. Bradley's voice came across the floor. The control was gone from it now. The silk that had carried him through 20 years of meetings had unraveled into something thinner and louder. "Catherine, you are going to dismantle your father's company over a man you met 30 minutes ago." Catherine turned toward him. For 4 years, she had spoken to Bradley in the level register a CEO used with a senior officer she trusted. She did not use that register now. She used his first name, and she used it the way her father used to use it when one of his men had let him down on a shop floor in 1992. Bradley. Her voice was quiet enough that the people in the front row leaned forward. "My father told me one thing about this business. The work has to be honest. You made me forget that for 4 years. I am not dismantling my father's company tonight. I am giving it back to him." The room understood that something had ended. Bradley looked for a moment as if he might say one more thing. Then he looked at Marco, who had already turned his face away. He looked at Catherine, who was no longer looking at him at all. He looked at the engineers who had spent the evening kneeling beside the SF-90, none of whom met his eye. He walked out through the side door. No one stopped him. No one followed. Catherine turned back to Ryan. "It will be done by Friday." Ryan nodded. He did not say, "Thank you." The thing being given back to him had never belonged to her to give in the first place. Both of them understood the grammar of that, and neither of them needed to say it out loud. The contract was signed at 10:11 that evening. The audit clause went in as a binding appendix. Marco signed first, then Catherine in front of the cameras that had been waiting all night for a different photograph. The press received a brief statement at 11 o'clock about the new clause, framed as a partnership initiative between Hale Performance and Marconi. There was no mention of Bradley Cross. There was no mention of Ryan Calloway. Ryan understood, standing near the back wall while the cameras flashed, that Catherine was protecting him. He had not asked her to. She had not asked permission. She was simply doing it the way she had done a great many things in the last 7 years, quietly, with the calculation already finished by the time anyone noticed she had made it. He registered it. He filed it. He would think about it later. Lily had fallen asleep on the banquette by 10:30, her cheek against the toy Ferrari, her puffer jacket pulled across her like a blanket by a waiter who had a daughter the same age. Ryan carried her out of the building at 11:15. Bradley Cross filed his resignation by email at 6:42 on Saturday morning. The email was 3 sentences long and gave no reason. Human Resources sent a company-wide notice on Saturday afternoon. The Vice President of Engineering position is being restructured as part of a broader review of departmental leadership. No press release. No public dismantling. Catherine had decided what she had decided and stopped there. She did not need to break a man further than he had broken himself. Her father had taught her that too, precision, not excess. Bradley would not work in this industry at this level again. He would land somewhere, eventually smaller. The market had a long memory for the kind of email that got sent on a Saturday afternoon. Catherine did not require more than that. On Monday morning, Natalie Osei was waiting for Ryan in the lobby of the Hale Performance Building when he came through the front doors at 8:15. She was holding a printed copy of the official document in a clear plastic sleeve. The byline at the top read Ryan Calloway, Lead Hybrid Powertrain Architecture, March 2020. Below it in smaller type, an editorial note, authorship corrected public record, amended audit log attached. It went through at 6 this morning, Natalie said. I wanted you to see it before anyone else. Ryan took the sleeve. He read it once, slowly. He did not say anything for a moment. Thank you, he said. The 2 words came out smaller than he meant them to. He cleared his throat and said it again the way he meant it. Thank you. Natalie nodded. Catherine wants to see you in the conference room on 12. I'm supposed to walk you up. In the elevator, she told him, looking straight ahead at the brass panel, that Catherine had created a new role on Friday afternoon. Head of Internal Documentation Audit, reporting directly to the CEO. The role was hers. She had accepted it that morning. She did not say that the role was the reward for what she had done in the showcase. She did not have to. Ryan understood. He looked at her once in the reflection of the elevator doors and gave her the smallest nod, the kind of nod one professional gives another when both of them know exactly what was risked. The conference room on the 12th floor had a long walnut table and a window that looked east toward the river. Catherine was already seated. There was a single document on the table in front of an empty chair, a single document in front of her, and a pen. She gestured to the chair. He sat. She pushed the document across to him. It was an offer of employment. Director of Engineering, a new title. One rung below her, but not the seat Bradley had vacated. She had not taken Bradley's chair and given it to Ryan. That would have been replacement. What she was offering was different. The role had been written around what Ryan was good at and what his life required. The hours clause specified that he was to leave the building no later than 2:45 every weekday, school pickup at 3:15 non-negotiable. The salary line had been written by someone who understood what nearly a year of grief and 4 years of contract trucking did to a household budget. He read the contract from beginning to end. He did not skim. Catherine watched him read and did not interrupt. He found 3 things he wanted to ask about, and he asked them in order. She answered each one directly. He picked up the pen. He signed at the bottom of the second page. The pen click was the only sound in the room. Catherine extended her hand across the table. "Welcome back," she said. He took her hand. "I was never here before." She held the handshake 1 beat longer than ordinary. You were here. We just didn't know your name." He let go of her hand and stood up. He folded the document into the inside pocket of his jacket, the same gray jacket he had worn into the building on Friday night, washed twice over the weekend, the grease stain on the cuff still there. He did not own a different jacket. He would eventually. Not yet. At 3:11 that afternoon, he stood in the parking lot outside Lily's elementary school in Queens 4 minutes early. He saw her before she saw him, which was unusual. She was standing at the classroom window, with her face pressed against the glass, watching for him through the rain that had started just after lunch, and the toy Ferrari was on the sill beside her cheek. Her teacher was helping her zip her coat. She turned her head and saw him, and the zip got abandoned halfway up, and she ran for the door. She came out at full speed across the wet asphalt, the toy Ferrari clutched in her right hand, her coat half zipped, both shoes already untying themselves, the way they did every afternoon, and she had begun talking before she reached him. "Did you go to the new place? Was there a car? What color was the car?" He crouched down to her height. He pulled the half-zipped coat the rest of the way up and did the snap at the top, the way he had every afternoon since her mother died. He took her free hand in his. He thought of the Ferrari under the chandeliers. He thought of his daughter raising the toy car toward the ceiling in a room full of grown men who had given up. He thought of Sarah, who had bought the toy in a hospital gift shop 2 weeks before she died, because she had known the way she had always known about Lily, that this was the one her daughter would carry. He thought of his name, printed at the top of the document, folded against his ribs. "Same color as yours," he said. Lily looked down at the toy in her hand. She looked up at him. She smiled, the way a 6-year-old smiles, when the world has finally arranged itself the way it ought to have been arranged from the start. And she did not say anything else, because she did not need to. He stood. He took her hand. They walked toward the bus stop together through the light rain. The city of New York moved around them indifferent the way it had always been. Indifferent, 8 million engines running under 8 million hoods, and somewhere in the moving dark, every one of them waiting for someone who knew how to start them.